This submission is a transcript of a commentary video that criticizes the children's entertainer Miss Rachel over a recent social media controversy. Let's get right into the feedback.
Let's do it.
There's a lot to unpack, and the subject is obviously pretty charged.
Absolutely.
So the core goal seems to be, exposing hypocrisy in her apology. But right off the bat, the critique's persuasive power is really undermined by ad hominem attacks and, honestly, some gendered condescension.
Yeah, that's the first thing that jumps out. It really distracts from what are some actually pretty good points about the logical inconsistencies.
It does. I mean, it feels like the writer is venting more than analyzing. And I think that's the weakness here. The speaker keeps interrupting their own arguments just to insult Miss Rachel's intelligence or her character.
Right, you see words like dingbat.
Yeah, or just calling her woman over and over again. Phrases like, honestly, woman, know when to pull the ripcord.
It creates this emotional volatility, doesn't it?
It does. And instead of focusing on her PR failure, the listener starts focusing on the critic's anger.
Exactly. It almost gives Miss Rachel the high ground. Suddenly, she's the one being bullied, and the actual point of the critique gets completely lost.
So the suggestion is pretty clear. We need to shift the tone from an angry rant to more of a disappointed, objective analysis.
A clinical takedown?
A clinical takedown is always more devastating. The argument is just so much stronger if she's treated as a professional who's failing to meet a standard, not just a caricature to mock.
Okay, so let's get concrete. How do we do that? What are some examples?
Well, take that line, I understood that you're a dingbat. It's just an insult.
It offers nothing, yeah.
So instead, we could rephrase it as something like, this explanation strains credulity and suggests a complete lack of professional foresight.
Ooh, that's so much better. It's the same point that she made a terrible move, but it frames it as a competency issue. It's fair game.
It questions her ability to do her job. And what about that jarring, again, woman we don't need line?
Yeah, that one really stood out.
We just pivot to her role. Replace that with, as a public figure, the audience requires accountability, not performative explanations.
You're reminding the audience of the contract she has with them. It's not personal, it's professional.
And the sarcastic mimicry, the, oh dear, I'm sorry, that has to go.
It feels like we're on a playground.
It does. Instead, just describe her tone. You could say, she adopts a tone of innocent confusion, which stands in stark contrast to the sophisticated nature of the political comment she engaged with.
That cuts so much deeper because it exposes the performance. It elevates the whole piece from just another reaction video to something more like a video essay.
Right. Now let's move on to the core of the accident.
The central claim.
It is. The argument in the script is that her social media interaction wasn't an accident, but it kind of suffers from circular reasoning. It doesn't really prove it with hard evidence.
Yeah, I saw that. It just keeps repeating, you intentionally commented, you intentionally liked. That ain't a mistake. But, is saying it over and over again the same as proving it?
No, and that's the weakness. The speaker relies on repetition, on volume. It loops back on itself without ever actually dissecting the technical impossibility of her claim.
So it leaves the door open for someone to say, well, maybe she just slipped. Phones are weird.
Exactly. So the suggestion is to stop asserting and start analyzing, deconstruct the user interface, the UI mechanics, to prove why an accident is so unlikely.
A forensic analysis. I love that. Don't just tell me, show me.
Exactly. Take the listener through the actual physical steps.
So what would that sound like in the script?
Okay, so instead of just yelling, it wasn't a mistake, the script should say something like, to leave a specific reply like the one she did, you have to click reply, type a coherent sentence, and then hit send. That requires multiple conscious motor functions.
Which makes the accident defense just factually incoherent. You can't accidentally perform a 3-step action that results in a grammatically correct sentence.
Precisely. And we can go even deeper. Let's talk about the content of the comment she liked. The Jews set her up.
Which is, crucial.
It's everything. The script should analyze why reading, processing, and then liking that specific phrase implies cognitive engagement. You can't accidentally comprehend a conspiracy theory and then accidentally agree with it.
It really highlights a difference between a physical slip and a mental choice. It's like, the difference between dropping a glass and throwing it.
That is the perfect analogy. So you contrast her claim of being human with the specific nature of this mistake. She's confusing a slip with a choice. One is gravity, the other is intent.
That is so clear and actionable. It just completely dismantles the oopsie defense.
Right. And that brings us to her other major shield, her religion.
Ah, yes, the God's plan defense. The script spends a lot of time on this.
It does, and the rebuttal is thematically strong, but it risks turning into a theological debate instead of a PR critique.
I noticed that. The speaker says things like, I don't think God's going to be like, oh, well, thank you. He's basically arguing about what God thinks, right?
He is, and that's the weakness. He counters her interpretation of faith with his own interpretation. He says, I'm a Christian, but...
And then he lectures her on his version of Christianity, which, opens the door for any listener who disagrees with his theology to just tune out.
You've lost them. Suddenly you're not arguing about her manipulation anymore. You're arguing about Scripture.
So how do we critique it without, bringing a Bible into it? What's the better strategy?
The suggestion is to frame it as a rhetorical tactic. There's a term for it, spiritual bypassing.
Spiritual bypassing. I like that.
You focus on how she uses these divine concepts to shut down valid secular criticism. So instead of saying, God doesn't like this, we say, you are using God to stop people from asking legitimate questions.
That reframes it completely. It's not about if she's a good Christian, it's about if she's an honest communicator.
Exactly. So for an example, instead of saying, Miss Rachel, don't bring him into this situation, which is just a command.
Right.
You argue that invoking God's peace serves to categorize legitimate criticism as worldly attacks, thereby delegitimizing valid questions from parents.
That is so powerful. And she has that line about teaching kids they can make mistakes.
Right. The script needs to point out that she's conflating teaching moments with evading consequence. She's weaponizing the idea of grace to avoid professional accountability.
It's like she's treating her adult audience like the toddler she entertains.
And you can highlight the contradiction she creates. She claims a divine calling to speak out against injustice.
But then blames God's plan when her speaking out goes wrong. It's having it both ways.
You can't do that. You can't claim a divine mandate for your speech and then retreat behind divine mystery when people react. It makes the critique about logic, which is universal, not religion, which is personal.
Okay. That tightens the whole argument up. Now, there was one other thing in the script that felt like, a buried treasure.
Oh, absolutely. This might be the most important point. The script introduces the idea of confirmation bias, which is a brilliant lens, but it does it way too late and doesn't really apply it.
I caught that right at the end. The speaker says something like, confirmation bias is what we call it. You're looking for the other side to justify your actions. And I just thought, wait, isn't that the whole point? That explains everything.
It is the whole point, and that's the weakness. It's the most damning intellectual argument in the whole piece, but it's buried under all the other commentary. It's just a throwaway line.
And if you bury it, you miss the why. The audience is left wondering why on earth she would like a comment that says the Jews set her up. It's irrational without that psychological explanation.
Yes. So the suggestion is elevate the confirmation bias argument. Make it a central pillar of the entire critique. It provides the motive.
So how do we do that?
Do we move it to the beginning?
You weave it through the analysis of the like itself. You build a whole section around the psychology of being set up.
Okay.
The script should explain she likely saw a comment saying, the Jew set you up, and her brain it immediately accepted it because it relieved her of guilt. This is textbook confirmation bias.
That's fascinating because it makes her seem less like a monster and more like a flawed human, which is almost a more damning critique because it's more believable.
It is, and you connect it directly to the accident excuse. You can say it wasn't a mechanical accident, it was a psychological lapse where she sought validation from any source, even an anti-Semitic one, to protect her own ego.
Professional would identify this as confirmation bias. She identifies it as a misunderstanding, and that's why she can't contain the crisis.
It ties everything together. The ad hominem attacks become unnecessary, the accident defense falls apart, the religious shield is exposed as a cover-up for the bias.
It turns a rambling rant into a really cohesive breakdown.
It feels like the writer just got too caught up in the YouTube comment section battle.
That's a common trap. When you're in a controversy, you feel like you have to pick a side and fight. But the best critique doesn't fight, it dissects. It stands back and says, look at how this machine is broken.
I like that. We're moving from a fight to an autopsy.
An autopsy of a PR disaster. That's the tone.
So if the writer makes all these changes, what are we left with?
We're left with the definitive rebuttal, a piece that could actually convince a neutral observer, not just preach to the choir. It widens the audience and it deepens the impact.
And that's the goal, right? To be persuasive, not just loud?
Always.
So if we restructure this, does it flow better? The original kind of jumps all over the place.
It has to flow better. The structure should tell a story. First, here's the the like. Second, here's proof it was intentional using UI forensics. Third, here's why she did it. Confirmation bias. And fourth, here's how she tried to defend it, using spiritual bypass.
That's a narrative arc. The current draft is just shotgun blasts.
And that arc, people watch. You're solving a mystery. Why did she do this? Is so much more interesting than just screaming, she is bad.
That's a fantastic takeaway. She is bad is a conclusion. Here's how her mind tricked her is a journey.
Exactly, and we want to take the listener on that journey. A club versus a scalpel. We want surgical precision.
So, to wrap this up, the potential here is massive. The raw anger just needs to be distilled into cold, hard logic.
And that brings us to the end of this critique. To recap, the focus is really on elevating this from an emotional reaction to a forensic dismantling of an apology.
Right. By removing the gendered insults, using the UI mechanics to disprove the accident theory, and reframing the religious part as spiritual bypassing, the whole piece just becomes stronger.
And don't forget the confirmation bias.
Oh yeah, that's the glue. That holds the whole thing together.
It's the engine of the argument. So here's our call to action for the listener. Take this script, strip out the insults, and rebuild it around those confirmation bias and UI mechanics pillars. Resubmit the work once you've done that. We would love to see the polished version.
I would love to read that version. It sounds like a killer video essay.
It certainly does. Thank you for listening to the critique. Keep writing and keep refining.